Mainstream historians tell us that the Great Pyramid of Giza was built around 4,500 years ago during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu as a monumental tomb for the king. They claim it was constructed using simple copper tools, wooden sledges, and the manual labor of tens of thousands of workers. Yet this explanation collapses under even basic scrutiny. The very idea that a Bronze Age society without iron, steel, wheels, or pulleys could quarry, shape, transport, and lift over 2 million multi-ton blocks with near-machine precision defies all logic and physical feasibility. Copper is one of the softest metals, barely capable of cutting limestone, let alone the granite used in the king's chamber and other interior sections. Granite registers about 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, while copper is around 3. This makes it physically impossible for copper chisels to carve or shape granite blocks with the smoothness seen inside the pyramid. Modern engineers use diamond-tipped tools or high-speed saws to achieve similar precision. The official explanation asks us to believe that ancient laborers accomplished this by hand with stone hammers and copper blades, without leaving evidence of experimental phases or tool fragments sufficient for such monumental work. The Aswan quarries, located nearly 800 kilometers, about 500 miles, south of Giza, are the known source of the pyramid's red granite. Each block from that site weighs between 20 and 70 tons. The notion that these massive stones were cut, transported by river, hauled across desert sands, and lifted into place more than 40 meters, about 130 feet, above ground, all with ropes and manpower, borders on the impossible. No sled marks, ramps, or large-scale transport infrastructure consistent with this operation have ever been found. The ramps proposed by Egyptologists would require more material than the pyramid itself and could not have sustained the weight of the largest stones. Even if such ramps existed, the logistics remain implausible. To complete the structure in roughly 20 years, as the traditional narrative asserts, workers would need to set one block in place every 2 minutes, day and night, without interruption, for 2 decades. Each block would need to be perfectly aligned and leveled to within millimeters, fractions of an inch. No ancient record describes such an extraordinary feat, and no comparable project was attempted again in Egypt's history, even though later dynasties had superior tools and engineering knowledge.
It's possible there was a completely different branch of technology, and they had figured out something that allowed them to manipulate enormous stones. We just haven't figured it out yet.
We're looking at technologies that are not the same as ours.
Yes.
And that's partly why archaeologists can't see them, because they're looking for us in the past.
Experimental archaeologists attempting to replicate these results with chisels failed to produce the same smooth and consistent angles.
As you can see, we're leaving a lot of metal and very little stone is flaking off. Now, Dennis, will we see any progress in our lifetime?
Yes, if you came back in an hour's time, you would see about a 4 millimeter cut down into the stone.
The conclusion is unavoidable. The builders employed techniques or technologies no longer understood or available to us. Equally baffling is the problem of lifting and positioning the heaviest stones. Some ceiling blocks weigh over 50 tons and rest more than 20 meters, 65 feet, above the chamber floor. No known ancient lifting device, lever, or pulley system could have achieved this without collapsing under the load. The margin of error was effectively zero. A single misalignment would have cracked the entire chamber, yet the blocks fit perfectly, distributing weight evenly through interlocking angles, a design principle resembling modern stress engineering. Archaeological evidence at Giza also shows that the limestone casing stones, now mostly gone, were cut and polished to such perfection that the pyramid would have gleamed like a mirror under the sun. These outer blocks were set with joints so fine that no mortar was needed. Achieving this level of precision on tens of thousands of stones, using nothing but manual labor and copper tools, is beyond even modern stone masonry when performed at that scale. Furthermore, the weight of the pyramid is estimated at 6.5 million tons, resting on a base that is almost perfectly level to within 2 centimeters, less than 1 inch, across a span of more than 230 meters, 755 feet. The ancient builders would have had to survey, grade, and stabilize a vast limestone bedrock platform using measurement instruments that, according to mainstream history, did not exist. The margin of error across this foundation is less than what NASA allows for spacecraft assembly tolerances. If the pyramid were truly a tomb, one must ask why the builders would invest such inhuman effort, unprecedented precision, and advanced geometry in a single structure that would be sealed and never seen again. There are no comparable pyramids in Egypt's later history approaching this level of accuracy or scale. Instead of evolution in engineering, we see regression, less precision, smaller structures, and inferior materials. This suggests that the Great Pyramid was not the peak of a learning curve, but the remnant of lost knowledge inherited from an earlier, more advanced civilization. One of the most striking facts about the Great Pyramid is its extraordinary alignment. Every measurement, every angle, every placement seems intentional, as if the builders encoded a cosmic language into stone. One of the most striking facts about the Great Pyramid is its extraordinary alignment. Its sides face true north, south, east, and west, with an error margin of only 3/60ths of a degree. Even today, constructing a building with such precision would demand computer-guided instruments and laser technology. The builders of Giza achieved this accuracy without compasses, GPS, or any known optical devices. The question, then, is how they determined true north with such precision when magnetic compasses would not be invented for another 4,000 years. The alignment could not have been accidental. It suggests the use of advanced astronomical observations, possibly through the tracking of specific stars or solar shadows across time. This implies an understanding of Earth's rotation and axial precession, knowledge that modern astronomy did not quantify until thousands of years later. When scaled globally, the Great Pyramid's position becomes even more extraordinary. It sits almost exactly at the intersection of the Earth's longest line of latitude and its longest line of longitude. In other words, it lies near the geographic center of all the planet's land masses. The builders would have needed to understand not only their immediate landscape, but also the curvature and proportions of the entire Earth. To center a monument so perfectly requires an awareness of global geodesy, a science that only emerged in modern times with satellite mapping. Equally astonishing are the pyramid's celestial correlations. When viewed from above, the 3 pyramids of Giza align perfectly with the 3 stars of Orion's belt, mirroring their positions and relative sizes with remarkable precision. Strikingly, the same celestial pattern appears in other pyramid complexes across the world, such as Teotihuacan in Mexico or the Xi'an pyramids of China. Additionally, the southern shaft of the King's Chamber aligns with Orion's belt on the equinox, while the shaft of the Queen's Chamber aligns with Sirius, suggesting the pyramid may have been a stellar observatory, or something much more than a simple tomb. The shafts are too small for human passage, so their true purpose is still unexplained. In fact, no mummy, no Egyptian hieroglyphs, or any Egyptian artifacts have ever been discovered inside the pyramid. Inside the Great Pyramid, there are no traces of soot or smoke on the walls or ceilings, suggesting torches were never used for illumination. This absence raises the question of how the ancient builders managed to work and decorate deep within the dark chambers. The geometry of the Great Pyramid adds another layer of mystery. Its proportions reflect mathematical constants that were supposedly unknown to the ancient world. The ratio of its base perimeter to its height equals 2 pi, or 6.283, the same number that relates a circle's circumference to its diameter. In other words, the pyramid is a three-dimensional expression of pi, a concept not formally recorded until Greek mathematicians like Archimedes thousands of years later. The builders somehow integrated circular geometry into a square-based monument, bridging two-dimensional and three-dimensional forms with mathematical perfection. Even more curious is the presence of the golden ratio. The slope angle of the Great Pyramid encodes this ratio precisely when comparing its height to half its base length. The geographic coordinates of the Great Pyramid's location correspond exactly to the speed of light in meters per second. Additionally, the pyramid's calculated mass is proportionally aligned with Earth's total mass when scaled by the same ratio used in its geometric design, suggesting a deliberate encoding of planetary and physical constants. Inside, the tunnels and passageways demonstrate an equally baffling precision. The corridors extending through the structure are perfectly straight over distances exceeding 100 meters, 328 feet, cut through solid limestone with no measurable deviation. Modern laser alignment tools would be required to replicate that today. Yet the builders achieved it in darkness, deep within stone, using tools officially described as copper chisels and string lines. The impossibility of such work without optical surveying instruments calls the entire mainstream narrative into question. Equally perplexing is the consistency of block sizing across layers. Each course of stone maintains the same height and angle across the pyramid's vast surface area. This kind of uniformity implies not random laborers, but an organized, technologically guided workforce capable of quality control across millions of tons of material. Every block fits as though it were part of a grand architectural blueprint executed with mechanical precision. The structure's consistency from base to summit reveals centralized design, not primitive improvisation. Even the height of the Great Pyramid is astonishing, considering it remained the tallest man-made structure on Earth for over 3,800 years. It held this record until the construction of England's Lincoln Cathedral around 1311 AD. In 1940, British Air Force pilot P. Groves noticed something extraordinary while flying over the Great Pyramid. From the air, he saw that each face was subtly concave, forming 8 sides instead of 4. This phenomenon is visible only at sunrise and sunset during the equinoxes, when sunlight strikes the pyramid at a perfect angle. The precision of this hidden design suggests an intentional geometric feature. It raises the question of why the builders created a pattern visible only from above, thousands of years before flight existed. In the early 1990s, a German engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small robotic camera up the narrow southern shaft of the so-called Queen's Chamber of the Great Pyramid of Giza. He found that the shaft extends upward for approximately 21 meters, about 70 feet, at an angle of 39 degrees before abruptly ending at what appeared to be a small limestone door. What startled researchers was that this door was not a crude blockage, but a finely crafted slab fitted perfectly within the shaft's walls, and embedded within it were 2 metal rods, small yet deliberate, made of copper or a copper alloy. These metal rods, which curved outward like handles, immediately sparked fascination and debate. No other metal fittings of this kind had been found anywhere else in the Bronze Age world. Each rod emerged from a circular socket carved directly into the limestone slab, showing clear evidence of advanced drilling. The door itself was smooth and polished on the side visible to the robot, a sign that its makers took exceptional care to finish a surface no human eye was ever meant to see. This discovery alone contradicted the idea of the shafts being simple air channels. The presence of fitted copper elements indicated engineering intent. Over the following years, Egyptologists and independent researchers debated whether these metal pieces were functional handles, hinges, symbolic connectors, or part of a larger mechanism now lost to time. In 2002, another robot equipped with a miniature drill was sent up the same shaft. Engineers carefully bored a small hole through the limestone door, revealing an unexpected sight on the other side. Another empty cavity, and at its end, a second stone slab, once again smooth and polished. This suggested that the door was not a dead end, but part of a sequence of sealed chambers extending deeper into the pyramid's core. Such precision layering of blocks, separated by air gaps, implied that the builders had planned this complex internal structure with foresight and advanced surveying. Nearly a decade later, in 2011, the JEDI project used a more advanced fiber optic camera to re-examine the space behind the first slab. For the first time, researchers saw the reverse side of the door. It was smooth, finished, and marked with faint red symbols, which strangely looked like some kind of electrical diagrams. What puzzled engineers most was the nature of the copper itself. Over 4,000 years, the metal had corroded only superficially, suggesting a high-quality alloy with trace elements that improved its resistance to oxidation. The craftsmanship was so refined that even modern metallurgists admitted it exceeded expectations for the era. The purpose of these metal fittings remains unknown. Some speculate that the rods may have had a functional role, possibly part of an ancient mechanism or energy system related to the pyramid's internal geometry and potential electromagnetic properties. You can run an electric current through copper wire, and the coil will produce a short-range magnetic field. Add a second coil and the power is transferred from one coil to the other. A windowless room with copper wirings could create a higher potential on one wall, which transfers energy to the lower potential, consequentially releasing electromagnetic energy into the confined space of the so-called Queen's Chamber. In 2020, a dusty wooden fragment stored in an old cigar box within the University of Aberdeen shattered one of the longest-standing assumptions in archaeology. This forgotten relic, a small piece of cedar wood, wasn't just a misplaced antiquity. It was the missing component of a trio of enigmatic objects known as the Dixon relics, found inside the Great Pyramid of Giza in 1872. Its rediscovery, followed by radiocarbon dating, offered a result so shocking that it forced both skeptics and Egyptologists alike to pause. The wood, sealed in a narrow shaft in the Queen's Chamber, inaccessible since the Great Pyramid's construction, dated not to 2500 BC, the traditionally accepted date of Khufu's reign, but to a staggering 3341 to 3094 BC. This discrepancy of over 5 centuries suggests something few have dared to propose openly. The Great Pyramid may be far older than mainstream Egyptology admits. More than that, it may not even have been built by the Egyptians we know, but by a civilization lost to time. The tale of the Dixon relics begins not in a university archive, but in the silent, echoing chambers of the Great Pyramid itself. In 1872, Wayneman Dixon, an engineer, and James Grant, a physician and adventurer, were exploring the Queen's Chamber of the pyramid. This chamber, unlike the King's Chamber, was once considered unfinished, but Dixon and Grant suspected otherwise. After noting suspicious cracks and faint airflows along the walls, they decided to investigate more deeply. With the boldness of 19th-century explorers, they chiseled into the north and south walls of the Queen's Chamber, revealing two previously unknown narrow shafts, air channels, or perhaps something far more mysterious. What they found inside the northern shaft became known as the Dixon relics, a small copper hook, a stone ball, and a rod of cedar wood. Two of these items, the hook and the ball, were sent to the British Museum and catalogued. The wooden fragment, however, remained in Grant's possession, eventually donated to the University of Aberdeen in 1946 by his daughter. For decades, it vanished from view, misplaced among countless uncatalogued items. Then, in 2020, curatorial assistant Abir Eladini, herself Egyptian by birth, stumbled upon the long-lost object. Nestled in a cigar box labeled with Egypt's old flag, this small, fragmented cedar rod emerged as a potential keystone in the mystery of the Great Pyramid's true origins. Beyond the wood, the other two Dixon artifacts deserve renewed attention. The copper hook, described as a forked implement, and the granite ball, both now in the British Museum, are odd finds. Their purpose is unknown. Were they tools, ritual objects, construction aids? Some researchers speculate that they may have been symbolic, perhaps representing elements of measurement or control. Others argue they were functional, possibly used in the positioning of heavy stones or in resonance-based engineering, a theory tied to ideas of acoustic levitation and advanced harmonic technologies. They may have been used in ways we do not yet comprehend, perhaps in conjunction with lost techniques of engineering or energy manipulation. But here's what many forget. The relics recovered in Aberdeen was only a fragment of something larger. Dixon himself noted in his diary that the wooden piece was broken off from a longer section, and that he broke it accidentally while jabbing at the contents of the shaft with a long iron probe. In his own words, bit of wood broken off from a larger part measuring 5 inches, fractured accidentally. This was not debris. It was part of a complete wooden tool, a square section rod still embedded in the shaft to this day, partially visible beyond the 9th block, where the shaft angles 45 degrees. Photographs and footage from Rudolf Gantenbrink's robot, which explored the northern Queen's Chamber shaft in the 1990s, confirmed the existence of a square wooden rod still sitting on the shaft floor. It runs along the eastern wall and extends into the darkness beyond the robot's turning capability. At the bend in the shaft, where it shifts 45 degrees westward, seemingly to avoid the Grand Gallery, the rod continues toward a curious rectangular structure. Here's where things get interesting. Initially, some assumed this wooden rod was just a fragment of Dixon's iron tool, but that theory falls apart under scrutiny. Dixon's rod was hexagonal in section, while the wooden one still in the shaft is square. Even more telling, Dixon's iron rod is still lodged in the right wall, on top of the wooden rod. The square rod lies beneath it, undisturbed since ancient times. This wooden rod was not something Dixon inserted. It was already there, and it still is. Let's go back to the hook. The artifact found in 1872 and now held by the British Museum is often described simply as a copper-forked implement, but Dixon's own notes add crucial detail. It was bronze green with incrustations, once riveted onto a wooden handle. The hook has 2 rivet holes, and within the same shaft lies a small rectangular block with 2 matching holes, exactly spaced to align with the hook. This suggests, beyond any reasonable doubt, that the copper hook was once mounted to this very rod, making it not just an artifact, but part of a larger tool. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't random. It was mechanical. A grappling or cleaning tool inserted into the shaft, or perhaps even built into it, during construction. If so, we're looking at a piece of equipment from the pyramid's builders themselves, not priests or tomb robbers or ritual activity. The full length of the rod is still unknown. The robot could not traverse the bend in the shaft, and the so-called Pyramid Rover expedition in the early 2000s, which re-explored the shaft, never released raw footage or detailed documentation of what was seen further in. Why? What's there? But what's clear is this: the copper hook, the cedar rod, and the matching riveted base form a functional physical system, one still embedded inside the pyramid, untouched by history or excavation. And crucially, if the piece in Aberdeen was broken from the rod that remains in place, then we have another datable piece of the pyramid's original construction still inside, one that could be tested, measured, and analyzed. But it hasn't been. Why hasn't it been retrieved? Why isn't it being studied? Any serious investigation into the mysteries of the Great Pyramid, especially those involving the Queen's chamber shafts, the Dixon relics, or underground anomalies, will eventually run into one name: Dr. Zahi Hawass. A former Minister of Antiquities and longtime head of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, SCA, in Egypt, Hawass has been both praised and criticized for his role as the most visible and powerful figure in Egyptian archaeology over the last 3 decades. On the one hand, he has helped protect Egypt's heritage and popularize its wonders to the world. On the other, he has drawn growing criticism for his tight control over research, excavations, access to data, and public narratives. For many independent researchers, historians, and engineers, Dr. Hawass is not simply a scholar. He is a gatekeeper. And in the case of the Dixon relics and the Queen's chamber shafts, he has become the face of obstruction. After Gantenbrink's discovery, instead of celebrating it, Hawass shut down the project. Gantenbrink was publicly criticized, and access to the pyramid shafts was revoked. For years afterward, he was not allowed back to continue his investigation. What about the northern shaft, where the Dixon rod still lies? Why haven't we seen what lies beyond the 45-degree bend? Why hasn't the rest of the rod, or the strange rectangular object, been recovered and tested? These are the questions many researchers ask, and the answer again and again seems to be because Zahi Hawass denies access. Throughout his long tenure, Dr. Hawass has repeatedly been accused of denying permits to independent or foreign researchers who challenge the mainstream narrative, shutting down digs that might reveal pre-dynastic or controversial findings, and enforcing a singular narrative that the pyramids were built as tombs by pharaohs using copper tools and human labor alone, with no room for alternative theories. While this may be standard academic gatekeeping to protect against pseudoscience, critics argue that Hawass has taken this too far, censoring valid questions and blocking promising lines of inquiry. Graham Hancock and John Anthony West, who questioned the dynastic timeline, have been ridiculed or marginalized.
Now, Egyptologists will tell you that, oh, they could move heavy blocks because they put them on wet sand. Well, maybe if you're just at ground level, that will do. But when you're 350 feet above the ground, as you are in the King's Chamber, that won't do at all.
This man is a thief, and I don't want to talk to him. And I don't want his name to be mentioned. He's not academic. He is nothing. The matter is debated really and closed. It is debated closed. Exactly, I don't want to hear it. We're having an open discussion about all that. Don't talk to me! Please! Go away from me!
Because most of the information that's written on pyramids are wrong.
Most of it?
Most of it.
In archaeology books?
In archaeology books.
Really?
Except me.
With the rediscovery of the Dixon rod fragment in 2020 and the realization that its other half is still in the shaft, one would expect urgent follow-up, an immediate push to retrieve and date the remaining wood, to verify whether the original results hold, but nothing has been done. Some speculate that the rods may have had a functional role, possibly part of an ancient mechanism or energy system related to the pyramid's internal geometry and potential electromagnetic properties. In 2018, a group of physicists from the Institute of Laser Physics at the Russian Academy of Sciences conducted a detailed electromagnetic analysis of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Their research, using numerical simulations and modeling, revealed that the pyramid can concentrate electromagnetic energy, particularly in the radio wave range, into its internal chambers and beneath its base. The study showed that at certain resonant frequencies, the pyramid acts as a resonant cavity, focusing electromagnetic fields into specific areas, such as the King's Chamber and the Subterranean Chamber. These findings suggested that the monument's geometry, size, and materials interact with electromagnetic waves in highly specific and predictable ways. This discovery confirmed what many independent researchers had speculated for decades, that the Great Pyramid is not just a massive stone structure, but a precisely tuned resonator interacting with the natural energy fields of the Earth. The limestone casing, the granite interior, and the pyramid's shape all contribute to this effect. The granite used in the King's Chamber contains high concentrations of quartz and feldspar, both piezoelectric materials capable of generating electrical potential when subjected to pressure or vibration. In a structure weighing millions of tons, subtle vibrations from the earth or from flowing groundwater could have produced measurable electrical effects inside. The Russian study also found that the pyramid's geometry concentrates energy at the base and beneath the ground. When modeled under resonant conditions, electromagnetic waves were shown to collect near the chamber floors and below the monument's foundation, forming energy nodes. This pattern was not random. It was the direct result of the pyramid's proportions and alignment. Such focusing effects are used in modern resonant cavities, microwave antennas, and radio transmitters, implying that the pyramid's shape itself can influence and direct electromagnetic energy. Other independent experiments have supported these observations. In the 1970s, researcher Dr. Patrick Flanagan measured unusual electromagnetic and ionization effects in pyramid-shaped models. His tests showed that pyramidal geometry could concentrate static fields, preserving organic materials and affecting energy distribution within the enclosed space.
Those who believe will tell you that pyramids capture energy from the Earth's magnetic field and focus it into the interior of the pyramid, and also out the top. And they say you can use this energy to preserve meats and fruits without refrigeration, to energize the water you drink, even to refresh and energize your body if you sleep inside a pyramid.
Inside the Great Pyramid, the acoustic and vibrational properties further support the theory of energy concentration. When sound frequencies are generated inside the King's Chamber, standing waves form between the granite walls, amplifying specific harmonics, particularly around 440 Hz, the standard tuning frequency. The chamber is constructed from huge blocks of granite, a material known for its density and sound-reflecting abilities. When vocalizations or sounds are made within this chamber, they resonate, creating a powerful and reverberating acoustic effect. This resonance doesn't merely amplify sound, it seems to enhance it, giving it a quality that is both profound and enduring. Listen to these acoustic demonstrations from Brian Forrester's video in which he examines the King's Chamber, together with Youssef Awiyan, an expert of acoustic resonance. The sound can linger in the air far longer than one would expect, leading researchers to propose that the pyramid's architects might have intentionally incorporated these acoustic features. The specific dimensions and materials chosen for the King's Chamber, and possibly other parts of the pyramid, could have been meticulously selected to achieve a particular resonance frequency. This suggests a level of knowledge and intentionality in the use of sound that is quite advanced, indicating the practical significance of acoustics in the pyramid's design. One of the most astounding theories of all emerged in the 1960s, thanks to a man named Edward Kunkel. In 1962, Kunkel published a book entitled Pharaoh's Pump, which shook up the world of Egyptology. In it, he argued that the passages and chambers in and beneath the Great Pyramid were the conduits and reservoirs of a giant water pump that would have been used to send water out into the desert to irrigate the land. According to Kunkel, the pyramid actually contained two pumps, one underground, represented by the pyramid's mysterious subterranean chamber, and the other above ground in the middle and upper chambers. Together, they would create two streams that would exit the pyramid through shafts on the north and south sides. Unsurprisingly, Kunkel's work caused great skepticism, not only from Egyptologists who rejected the theory outright, but from engineers who pointed out that Kunkel's design would have required the creation of a vacuum, a number of valves, and some type of combustible fuel and combustion chamber to drive the pump. Yet, not bound by the same restrictions as mainstream Egyptology, many engineers began to look closer at Kunkel's work, realizing that it was not totally without merit. While Kunkel's two-pump design would likely not have been possible, some engineers noted that a ram pump might actually make sense. A ram pump is a simple device used for centuries to move water from a reservoir to somewhere else using two moving parts and the force of gravity. Could the builders of the Great Pyramid really have created a ram pump on such a massive scale? With the possibility established, other researchers and scholars picked up on the idea, designing a theoretical layout in which the Great Pyramid was fed with water from the Western Nile and nearby Lake Moeris, which each sat at a higher elevation, making them the perfect sources for a gravity-fed water system on the Giza Plateau. Some even believe that the retaining wall, which is known to have once surrounded the pyramid complex, could have been an embankment for an on-site reservoir. As more and more people came to believe that the Great Pyramid really could have been an enormous ancient water pump, they were backed by one simple, overarching argument: economics. Think about it. The Great Pyramid is made up of 2.3 million blocks, each weighing between 25 and 80 tons, meaning that if workers moved and laid 12 blocks per hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it would have taken 20 years to construct. More than that, it has been estimated that, adjusted into modern dollar values, the pyramid would have cost more than $5 billion to create. Simply, Why go to all this trouble and all this expense just for a tomb? Obviously, Egyptian pharaohs had more leeway than modern, democratically elected leaders, but they were not totally unbound from the realities of finance and economics. Would it not make more sense to go to all this trouble for something which was going to provide a higher return on investment, like, say, a water pump which would allow you to irrigate your civilization and feed your people? Here, we must take a step back in order to get to the point. If the Great Pyramid really was an enormous water pump, then it must have been pumping the water somewhere. This is where some have connected the dots and returned to the mysterious pit at Zawiat el Orion. They believe that the site was not an unfinished pyramid, but an outflow location for water pumped by the Great Pyramid, the giant pit designed as a reservoir for water pumped in from below. It might actually go much further than pumping water for irrigation. Early in 1999, a marine engineer named John Cadman was perusing the shelves at a used bookstore when he stumbled across an old, dusty copy of a most unusual book, Pharaoh's Pump. As an expert in hydraulics, the book intrigued Cadman, so he purchased it and took it home. When he began to read it more closely, he quickly realized that Kunkel's idea was not as ridiculous as he had initially assumed. Wanting to know more, Cadman began to learn everything he could about the Great Pyramid. Almost immediately, what he discovered captivated him. The Great Pyramid's subterranean chamber, he realized, looked eerily like the layout for a ram pump. He took his research further, noting from photographs that the subterranean chamber showed obvious signs of water damage, particularly on the ceiling, where signs of cavitation, which is caused by gas bubbles in water due to violent churning, were evident, as well as clear damage from compression waves striking it. In other words, it was not just that the subterranean chamber could work as a water pump, but according to Cadman's trained eyes, it appeared it had worked as such. At this point, Cadman knew what he had to do. He must draw upon his years of experience with hydraulics and create his own scale model of the pyramid and its subterranean chamber to see if it would really work as a water pump. He built his first model, using a nearby river as a reservoir. Unfortunately, the model did not work, first leaking, then cracking and failing to pump water as he had hoped. But Cadman would not give up that easily. He built another model, then another, both of which suffered the same fate as the first. But on his fourth try, he got everything right, and much to Cadman's delight, his pump worked. This proved to Cadman beyond a doubt that the Great Pyramid could have functioned as a giant water pump, and that surely this was not by accident. It was clear, he asserted, that the creators of the Great Pyramid's subterranean chamber had known exactly what they were doing. This was the breakthrough that disciples of Edward Kunkel's original work had been waiting for, the tangible proof that a Great Pyramid water pump was more than just speculation. And yet, as Cadman continued his research, the results got even more mind-blowing, and in fact, went far beyond the mere pumping of water. Having proved that the Great Pyramid's subterranean chamber could function as a water pump, Cadman built a new, bigger model and encased it in concrete in order to simulate the effects of the pump operating underground. He moved the model, which weighed over 500 pounds, to a seasonal creek with a pond serving as a reservoir. As this model began to work, Cadman immediately noticed something which shocked him. Encased in concrete, the pump was creating a vertical compression wave, a recurring heartbeat-like thump which could be felt through the ground 20 feet away and heard more than 100 feet away. Cadman realized that what he had constructed went far beyond just a water pump. Because of the powerful waves it generated, Cadman renamed the device a pulse generator. Truly, this changed everything. If the Great Pyramid's subterranean chamber was generating pulse waves, these waves would have moved through the granite upper chambers and passageways of the pyramid, and due to granite's reflective properties, created ionization in the atmosphere, in effect, producing an electric field. Put more simply, the pulses created by the subterranean pump would have interacted with the pyramid's granite to produce electricity. It appeared that Cadman had not only proven that the Great Pyramid could function as a water pump to move water around Egypt for irrigation, but one which could actually create electricity in ancient times. Of course, those who have watched this channel before will know that the idea of the Great Pyramid as an electrical generator did not start with John Cadman. In fact, as early as the turn of the 20th century, it appeared prominently in the work of famed inventor Nikola Tesla. But while many of you will already be aware of the work of Tesla, you may not be aware of his obsession with ancient Egypt, and specifically the pyramids, which he studied in detail, wrote about, and incorporated into his work. Consider, in 1905, Tesla filed a patent titled Art of Transmitting Electrical Energy Through a Natural Medium, which contained the design for something called Tesla's Electromagnetic Pyramid. Supplementing his genius with what he had learned about ancient Egypt, his idea was to use a huge pyramid-like structure to project energy skyward where it could then be harnessed by individual receptors around the world. Interestingly, Tesla actually built a model of his electromagnetic pyramid known as Wardenclyffe Tower, a 187-foot tall structure topped with a 55-ton dome of conductive metal. Unfortunately, before he could conclusively prove that his model could create energy, Tesla lost his funding and the project was abandoned. And yet, even though Tesla's work on electromagnetic pyramids disappeared, the idea did not. Thanks to Tesla, many began to look at the Great Pyramid with fresh eyes, and specifically its original makeup covered in white tufa limestone blocks, which are known for unparalleled insulating properties, its tunnels and chambers beneath lined with granite, a well-known electrical conductor. Simply, this would have been the perfect layout if the intent was to create and utilize electricity. Little granite channels of electrical conductivity surrounded by insulation, not unlike copper wires encased in rubber in modern electronic devices. Moreover, it is known that the Great Pyramid was originally topped by a capstone of gold, one of the most electrically conductive materials on Earth, similar to how Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower was topped with a 55-ton metal ball. In other words, if the Great Pyramid was designed for electricity, its builders couldn't have done it better. And if it wasn't, well, in an historic coincidence, they'd accidentally stumbled into the perfect design. Indeed, so suggestive was the evidence that the idea continued to develop into modern times. Christopher Dunn is a mechanical engineer who has worked for more than half a century at the highest levels of aerospace manufacturing. In the 1970s, Dunn began to develop an interest in the mysteries of the Great Pyramid of Giza. At the same time as he worked his day job in the aerospace industry, he began spending his spare time researching the Great Pyramid from a mechanical engineering perspective. Slowly but surely, he came to the belief that there was more to the pyramid than it seemed. In his words, "I came to the conclusion that with such an investment of resources and the extreme precision which was crafted into the building, it was a building that functioned as a machine, and the machine was used to harness energy from the earth. I was inspired to research and discover how this machine operated." For more than 20 years, he conducted this research, becoming a prominent expert on the subject, publishing dozens of articles and appearing as a trusted voice across mainstream television.
They were tuned to vibrate with the frequencies of the Earth, and they converted the energies of the Earth into electromagnetic energy.
In 1998, 1 year before John Cadman's legendary experiments which proved the electrical capacity of the Great Pyramid, Dunn finally published his seminal work, titled The Giza Power Plant. The book meticulously described a system in which the Great Pyramid drew seismic energy from the earth, producing electricity in the king's chamber through the use of hydrogen created by a chemical reaction in the queen's chamber. So groundbreaking was Dunn's work that it inspired researchers around the world to follow his lead. For more than 2 decades, research has continued and expanded, becoming only more astonishing every year. In fact, more than ever, science, and specifically mainstream science, is taking the idea of the Great Pyramid as an electrical generator seriously. In 2019, a new book was published by Egyptologists James Brown and J.J. and Desiree Hertog entitled Giza's Industrial Complex, which built on the work of Dunn to suggest that the entire Giza Plateau functioned as an energy-generating system. According to the authors, the structures around and beneath the plateau were designed to activate a sophisticated process of water splitting, which would allow hydrogen to be used as a fuel source. As they put it in the book, there is good evidence that the Great Pyramid was a gigantic water processing plant to create electrified water. It is indicative of how far the idea of the Great Pyramid as an electrical generator has come that the book and the idea were not immediately written off as ridiculous. In fact, instead of being mocked, the book actually won awards, including the prestigious New York City Big Book Award. Again, now more than ever, mainstream science views the possibility of the Great Pyramid as an electrical generator as eminently possible. The Djed pillar and the Ankh are iconic symbols of ancient Egypt. While separated by thousands of years and vastly different cultural contexts, a comparison of the Djed pillar and Tesla's technological innovations reveals a striking similarity. The Djed pillar, with its distinctive appearance featuring a broad base, a column-like body, and multiple horizontal bars at the top, holds a revered place in ancient Egyptian mythology and iconography. It is often interpreted as a symbol of stability and regeneration, closely associated with the god Osiris. In the mythological and religious context of ancient Egypt, the Djed was a potent symbol of the enduring nature of life and the order of the universe. Comparing the Djed pillar to Tesla's technology might seem far-fetched at first glance. However, the comparison becomes intriguing when considering the symbolic representation of energy and power in both contexts. The Djed pillar, as a symbol of stability and regeneration, can be metaphorically linked to the concept of continuous energy flow and the perpetual cycle of life and renewal. Tesla's work, particularly his experimentation with wireless energy and electromagnetic fields, resonates with this idea of a continuous, omnipresent source of power. Some speculative theories suggest that the Djed pillar could represent an ancient knowledge of electrical power or energy, drawing parallels to Tesla's vision of harnessing and distributing energy. These theories propose that the Djed, with its columnar shape and horizontal bars, bears a resemblance to components of electrical systems or devices used for energy transmission. The Dendera light is a fascinating topic steeped in mystery and intrigue, centering on the bas-reliefs in the Hathor Temple at Dendera. These reliefs have sparked widespread speculation and debate about the possibility of ancient Egyptians having knowledge of electricity. The reliefs in question depict what some interpret as large, elongated objects reminiscent of light bulbs. Priests hold these objects aloft, with more miniature figures below them directing the light bulb upwards. Inside them are snake-like forms, which some suggest represent filaments. A two-armed Djed pillar is also present. We already talked about the Djed pillar and how it resembles components of electrical systems or devices used for energy transmission. On another bas-relief, a peculiar device is depicted featuring lines extending from the object on the left side. Often likened to a necklace, It also bears resemblance to a stylized technological device. Should the interpretation of these lines as electrical wires hold true, then the spheres might actually represent insulators. This object appears to be connected to a type of battery, which in turn is linked to what seems to be a distribution mechanism. This setup echoes the circuitry designs found in vintage automobiles, particularly in petrol combustion engines, due to its simplicity and efficacy in facilitating continuous electric discharge. The hypothesis that these reliefs depict an ancient form of electrical lighting was popularized by Norwegian electrical engineer and Austrian authors Peter Krasa and Rainer Habeck. They published a book titled Light of the Pharaohs: High Technology and Electricity in Ancient Egypt. Walter Garn, another electrical engineer, even constructed a working model based on the Dendera light, supporting the theory. Many connect the Dendera light reliefs with the mysterious Baghdad batteries, a discovery that further fuels the debate about ancient civilizations and their potential knowledge of electricity. The Baghdad batteries, also known as the Parthian batteries, are a set of terracotta pots dating back to the Parthian or Sasanian periods. Each pot contained a copper cylinder that encased an iron rod, with the cylinder and rod not touching each other, filled with an acidic or alkaline substance, such as vinegar or lemon juice. These pots could have functioned as galvanic cells, essentially early forms of batteries. Many researchers built prototypes of the Baghdad batteries, testing them for electricity, and stunningly, they discovered that the batteries produce low voltages of electricity, proving that the ancients did, in fact, have knowledge of this phenomenon. Between 1977 and 1987, electronics engineer and inventor Joe Parr conducted a 10-year investigation into the electromagnetic and radioactive properties of the Great Pyramid of Giza. He believed that the pyramid's unique geometry, combined with its limestone and quartz composition, might generate a measurable energy field. He began by taking field measurements near the pyramid, monitoring magnetic variations and radiation levels. The readings occasionally showed brief spikes that he could not explain. Parr concluded that if a residual energy field still existed around the Great Pyramid, it had weakened over millennia and could only be studied under controlled laboratory conditions. To test this, he constructed scale models with the same geometric ratios and ran alternating magnetic currents through them to observe any electromagnetic effects. To his surprise, instruments detected what he described as an energy bubble forming around the pyramid model. This field appeared to block external radiation, including gamma rays, effectively creating a shielded zone. Encouraged by the result, Parr added a centrifuge inside the model to intensify the magnetic field. As the rotation increased, the pyramid's weight appeared to decrease, eventually becoming partially weightless. During one experiment, witnesses claimed that the pyramid levitated briefly, and in another it reportedly disappeared from sight before reappearing embedded in a nearby wall. From these results, Parr developed a bold theory that a pyramid could, under certain conditions, enter a form of hyperspace, momentarily shifting out of the physical dimension. He speculated that the pyramid's geometry allowed it to couple with the subtle energy fields that pervade the universe, what early scientists like Tesla once called the ether. According to Parr, this ability might have been known to ancient builders who designed the Great Pyramid as an advanced energy device rather than a tomb. Another intriguing discovery emerged from his data. The strength of the energy bubble fluctuated throughout the year, but was consistently strongest between December 12th and 16th. Parr found that this period coincided with a perfect alignment of the Earth, the Sun, and Orion's belt, the same constellation pattern that the three pyramids of Giza mirror. Remarkably, Parr recorded this correlation 7 years before Robert Bauval published the Orion Mystery, which linked the pyramid's layout to Orion's stars. Before his death in the early 2000s, Parr suggested that the Great Pyramid might have served as a dimensional gateway or time machine, capable of interacting with higher dimensions, an idea that resonates with concepts in string theory, which predicts at least 10 dimensions of reality. While mainstream science rejected his findings for lack of replication, Parr's experiments remain among the most fascinating attempts to explore the pyramid's potential connection to electromagnetic and cosmic forces. Whether genuine discovery or experimental anomaly, his work deepened the mystery surrounding the Great Pyramid's true purpose. The mystery deepened with the recent discoveries made beneath the Khafre Pyramid. The Khafre Pyramid has long captivated historians and archaeologists, especially in the last few days, when a small team of researchers unveiled findings that could rewrite the story of the Giza Plateau and the advanced prehistoric civilizations that mainstream scientists still dismiss. In a conference room in Italy, Professor Corrado Malanga of the University of Pisa stood before a screen glowing with radar-imaged shapes. What he revealed sent shockwaves through both the scientific community and the public. What he presented was evidence of massive man-made structures hidden deep beneath the Pyramid of Khafre, the second largest pyramid of the Giza complex. Using advanced synthetic aperture radar, SAR scans, and seismic data, Malanga and his colleague Filippo Biondi from the University of Strathclyde announced the discovery of a sprawling subterranean complex, in their words, a true underground city, lurking far below the desert surface. This announcement quickly became sensational news, igniting intense debates worldwide.
Apparently, through the use of LiDAR, they have discovered that there are enormous structures underneath the Great Pyramid that go kilometers.
They managed to get some data from the infrastructure that is beneath the soil, beneath the ground. And what they discover is, if you want, spiral hallways.
Could the pyramids, traditionally thought to be royal tombs, be perched atop a labyrinthine subterranean world? If so, who built these hidden chambers and for what purpose? The Pyramid of Khafre, a towering limestone giant, has stood for millennia as the second tallest of the Giza pyramids. It soars to a height of about 136 meters, approximately 450 feet, and still retains remnants of its smooth casing stones at the apex. Archaeologists exploring Khafre's pyramid since the 19th century found a relatively simple internal design. Descending passageways leading to a single main chamber carved into the bedrock where a red granite sarcophagus still resides, its lid long broken. Unlike the Great Pyramid, which contains multiple chambers and passages, Khafre's interior appeared straightforward, no elaborate mazes, no obvious hidden rooms. When Giovanni Battista Belzoni first breached its sealed corridors in 1818, he found the main chamber empty, save for the sarcophagus, with no treasure or additional passages to speak of. By all traditional accounts, Khafre's pyramid was a grand but singular purpose structure, a pharaonic tomb, and nothing more. However, the Giza Plateau has always provoked imaginations to wander beyond what is immediately visible. Khafre's pyramid sits on a plateau riddled with smaller tombs, temples, and possible underground cavities. Adjacent stands the Great Sphinx, under which legends have long whispered of hidden chambers. Over decades, occasional radar and sonar surveys around the Sphinx and pyramids hinted at anomalies, empty spaces, or unusual echoes. In the 1960s, physicist Luis Alvarez even used cosmic ray muon detectors to scan inside Khafre's pyramid for hidden chambers, but found none, Later analyses suggest the scan had limitations in coverage. By 2010, attention shifted more to the Great Pyramid of Khufu, where modern muon tomography revealed a mysterious void above the Grand Gallery in 2017. Khafre's pyramid remained comparatively underscanned, and its underground secrets remained sealed by hundreds of feet of solid rock. That is, until the Khafre project came along. Professor Corrado Malanga, a chemist turned researcher with unconventional leanings, and radar specialist Dr. Filippo Biondi set their sights on Khafre's edifice with fresh eyes and new tools. They suspected that what we see on the surface might not tell the full story of what Khafre's pyramid truly is. The key to the Khafre project's potential discovery lies in synthetic aperture radar, SAR imaging, a technology originally developed for remote sensing and military reconnaissance. Unlike traditional ground-penetrating radar used by archaeologists, which involves hauling radar equipment over the ground surface, SAR uses radar pulses beamed from satellites or aircraft. By processing the returning signals, SAR can produce high-resolution images of the landscape, even through clouds or sand. But Malanga and Biondi pushed SAR a step further. They weren't just interested in surface features, they wanted to see underground. At first glance, using radar from space to probe deep into rock sounds like science fiction. Normally, radar waves penetrate only a limited distance into dry, dense material. However, the researchers combined SAR data with Doppler tomography techniques and even the faint tremors of the Earth. As project spokesperson Nicole Sicolo explained, the team used tiny vibrations from naturally occurring seismic activity to help illuminate subsurface features. Essentially, as two satellites 420 miles overhead sent radar signals toward the pyramid, the subtle echoes and interferences, modulated by seismic micro-movements, were gathered and processed using advanced algorithms. The result was a kind of 3D radar X-ray of the ground beneath Khafre. Instead of simple limestone bedrock, the 3D images revealed extensive underground structures, including 5 multi-level structures reminiscent of the architectural style seen in the King's Chamber and relieving chambers of the Great Pyramid. Moreover, the team described 8 vertical cylindrical shafts extending approximately 650 meters underground, which is almost half a mile, each with spiral stairways leading down to 2 colossal cubic structures measuring about 80 meters per side. To visualize the scale, the Empire State Building stands at 443 meters tall, 1,450 feet, making these alleged subterranean cylinders even taller and more imposing. But that's not all. Nicole Sicolo noted that about 4,000 feet beneath the pyramid's base, there might exist further chambers or structures. This claim, if true, pushes the scenario into truly epic proportions, nearly 1.2 kilometers underground. When Professor Malanga magnified one particularly striking image, he was convinced beneath it lies what can only be described as a true underground city. The term city might sound hyperbolic, but standing back and looking at the composite, multiple buildings, interlinked corridors, huge shafts like subway tunnels and massive chambers, it does resemble an urban layout deliberately engineered. To visualize the discovery, the Khafre project shared dramatic 3D renderings. One image showed a ghostly perspective of the Pyramid of Khafre with translucent sides, revealing labyrinthine tunnels and chambers snaking below it, almost like an ant colony under a hill. Another rendering depicted the spiral wells in cross-section, spiraling downward into darkness. These digital models, the team explained, were approximations based on the radar tomography, but they gave the world a first glimpse of what these hidden structures might look like. The claims immediately set off excitement among history enthusiasts. Could this be the fabled lost city some had theorized might lie beneath Giza? On social media, hashtags related to the pyramids spiked. One viral post declared, "The megastructure they just found underneath the Giza pyramids is probably the most important discovery to ever be made in our lifetimes," blending awe with hyperbole. The world suddenly pictured an advanced ancient civilization of sophisticated engineers and unimaginable treasures sealed in the cubic vaults below. The factual details of the discovery were incredible enough, but they also served as tinder for a bonfire of speculation that was now catching fire. He went further, calling the notion of a vast city beneath the Giza pyramids a huge exaggeration. Conyers pointed out that while small subsurface cavities like tomb shafts or natural hollows might exist, the existence of an entire connected city-sized complex had no precedent and strained credulity. It is conceivable there are small structures, such as shafts and chambers, beneath the pyramids that existed before they were built. It's the scale of these claims that is questionable, he explained, referencing how other cultures, like the Maya, built pyramids atop sacred caves. In essence, yes, minor voids are possible under a pyramid, but the devil's in the details. 8 giant shafts and interlinked halls are another matter. The limitations of SAR technology were also highlighted by critics. Traditional SAR is excellent for mapping terrain or even identifying shallow buried features like buried riverbeds or walls a few meters down. But as Conyers and others noted, radar signals lose strength quickly in dense materials. SAR's effectiveness diminishes significantly beyond a few meters in solid geological formations, one expert noted dryly. How then could Malanga and Biondi claim to see hundreds of meters deep? The project's response is their special Doppler processing and the aid of seismic vibrations. But until independent scientists can review the data, healthy skepticism remains. It didn't help the project's case that peer review was still pending. The team's 2022 paper had undergone review, and even that raised eyebrows by including unorthodox references to theories. But the 2025 findings were announced via press conference and a self-published report, not yet vetted by outside experts. Dr. Hussein Abdelbasir, director of the Antiquities Museum in Alexandria, remarked that any real scientific discovery in the field of archaeology must be published first in a reliable scientific journal after careful review by independent experts. By that standard, he suggested, the Khafre underground city wasn't confirmed science, at least not yet. Perhaps the most vocal detractor was Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former Minister of Antiquities and a towering figure in Egyptology. Hawass has spent decades researching at Giza and is famously protective of Egypt's archaeological narrative. When news of the SAR scans hit media, Hawass swiftly and vehemently denied it. He labeled the claims baseless and lacking any scientific evidence, even accusing the authors of peddling fake news to undermine Egypt's heritage. Hawass asserted that no official project had detected such structures and that no radar devices or modern technologies have been used to detect alleged structures beneath the Khafre pyramid in any authorized capacity. Essentially, from the Egyptian authorities' perspective, nothing of the sort had been found because no sanctioned investigation found it, implying that Malanga's remote sensing might not even be considered legitimate without on-site verification. Hawass went so far as to say these rumors will go to the dustbin of history. Despite the skepticism from establishment figures, the Khafre project has its share of supporters and curious onlookers in the scientific community as well. Some geologists have shown interest in reviewing the raw data to see if natural geological formations, like echoing layers of limestone, might be tricking the radar. Others acknowledge that, while extraordinary, the data can't be dismissed outright without proper analysis. The sheer volume of details the team provided, specific depths, shapes, and connections, suggests they weren't just seeing random noise in the signals. It raised the question, what if they truly did detect something? Only a targeted ground truth, like drilling or endoscopic cameras through the rock, could confirm these voids exist. And that leads to the next hurdle, permission to excavate. This technical back and forth is far from settled. The Egyptian authorities have historically been cautious about new digs at Giza, especially ones that challenge orthodox views. As Nicole Chicolo noted, the team hopes to conduct physical verification, but securing approval for such investigations is incredibly tough. Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities would need to greenlight any intrusion into or beneath Khafre's pyramid. Given officials' current stance, that seems unlikely in the near term. The only way to prove the discoveries are true is through targeted excavations, one expert said. And ironically, that's the very thing that may not happen soon. Thus, the Khafre mystery hangs in a tantalizing balance. Technological evidence in hand, but no physical confirmation. In the meantime, the court of public opinion remains divided, with open-minded excitement tempered by calls for caution. One reason this story has captured so much public fascination is that it taps into long-standing legends about hidden chambers and lost knowledge beneath Egypt's monuments. As soon as Malanga, Biondi, and Chicolo began describing vast chambers beneath the Earth's surface, comparable in size to the pyramids themselves, ears perked up among those who are drawn to the mysteries of antiquity. The project's spokesperson even invoked the name of the legendary Halls of Amenti. But what are the Halls of Amenti? In ancient Egyptian mythology, Amenti can refer to the West, the land of the dead, where Ra travels at night. However, in more mystic and modern interpretations, notably the so-called Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Halls of Amenti are depicted as deep underground chambers where wisdom and perhaps the very consciousness of great masters are stored. These halls, according to legend, were hidden beneath the sands, guarded and rarely accessed except by enlightened beings. By drawing a remarkably strong correlation between the newly mapped structures and the Halls of Amenti, Nicole Chicolo was suggesting that the team's discovery might align with those ancient mythic accounts of an underworld library or even a place of regeneration. It was a bold and speculative connection, effectively blending science with myth. Yet, to those who have always believed Egypt's greatest secrets lie underfoot, it was vindication that such myths might be rooted in reality. A closely related legend is that of the Hall of Records, a fabled archive of knowledge, said to contain scrolls or tablets from Atlantis or the time of the gods, purportedly hidden somewhere in Giza, often thought to be under the Great Sphinx or one of the pyramids. This idea was popularized by mystics like Edgar Cayce in the 20th century. For years, people searched for the Hall of Records. Some even claim the Sphinx has a hollow chamber. Small cavities have indeed been detected under the Sphinx, but nothing like an archive has been found. The Khafre Project's findings have inevitably been linked to this legend as well. The researchers themselves mention the Hall of Records in their discussions, tying the symmetrical shafts and massive halls to the notion of stored ancient knowledge, particularly those associated with the god Thoth. Thoth, the Egyptian deity of wisdom, is often central in these tales, sometimes said to have hidden sacred texts in subterranean chambers to protect them from cataclysms. The resurgence of these legends in light of the SOR discovery creates an intoxicating mix of fact and folklore. Imagine if indeed an underground city exists and one day is entered. What might be found there? Some speculate it could be a cache of ancient scrolls or artifacts far older than dynastic Egypt, potentially detailing a lost civilization. Of course, such speculation runs ahead of evidence. But history has taught us that myth and reality sometimes intertwine in surprising ways. After all, Troy was a legendary city until it was actually found. Adding to the mystique, historical anecdotes and lesser-known excavations around Giza have hinted at underground features. In the late 1930s, archaeologist Selim Hassan reported finding large tunnels and what he described as catacombs north of the Khafre Pyramid, as well as a deep shaft near the Sphinx, the so-called Osiris shaft discovered later in the 1990s, turned out to be a multi-level tomb about 30 meters deep with a water-filled bottom chamber. These discoveries were real but limited in scope, a far cry from a 600-meter-deep complex, yet they fed the notion that Giza's bedrock contains more voids than one might expect. Each little find kept the flame of speculation flickering through the decades. Now, with Malanga and Biondi's announcement, those flames have flared into a bonfire. Internet forums and late-night radio shows lit up with discussions linking the halls of Amenti, Atlantis, and even extraterrestrials to the Giza underground network. Professor Malanga's own background as a UFO researcher, a fact noted by some critics, only added fuel to the imaginative fire. While the core team sticks to describing what the scans show, they do not shy away from drawing grand possibilities. The Khafre Project Conference even featured researcher Armando May, speculating a date of 36,400 BCE for the Giza complex origins and linking it to the mythical reign of Thoth. Such ideas are considered fringe by mainstream science. They rewrite timelines entirely, yet they resonate with those who suspect the official history of civilization is incomplete. In this atmosphere, the scientific interpretations and the speculative theories are advancing side by side, each spurring the other on. The data has revived ancient legends, and those legends in turn are giving the discovery an almost epic context. It's as if the dry facts of radar signals and limestone strata have opened a portal to a realm of archetypal human wonder, the eternal search for hidden knowledge. Whether or not one entertains the existence of the Hall of Records or the Halls of Amenti, it's undeniable that the Pyramid of Khafre has never felt more mysterious than it does today. The ground that millions of tourists have trod around this pyramid, taking routine photos, may hide something that until now was only whispered of in myth. Perhaps the most profound question arising from the Khafre underground discovery is what it implies about the purpose of the pyramids themselves. If the pyramids sit atop a gargantuan man-made complex, the traditional view of them as simple tombs with some supporting tunnels might need a dramatic re-evaluation. Malanga and Biondi's findings have energized proponents of alternative theories who have long argued that the Egyptian pyramids were more than royal grave markers. Now they feel scientific data is finally on their side. The Great Sphinx of Giza, standing an impressive 66 feet high and stretching 240 feet long, is a monument that captures the world's imagination like few others. Constructed from massive limestone blocks, some weighing up to 200 tons, it holds the title of the largest ancient sculpture in the world. Yet its grandeur is matched only by its mystery. To this day, the Sphinx's origins, purpose, and the secrets it may conceal remain a source of debate among historians and archaeologists. The Giza Plateau was known as Rostau, or the mouth of passages in ancient times. Does that mean that there really were passages beneath the complex? Passages leading to an underground city containing advanced technology? In the 5th century BCE, the famed Greek historian Herodotus wrote about an extensive underground labyrinth in Egypt, which housed a legendary hall of records containing ancient wisdom. Further accounts by notable historical figures like Strabo and Pliny the Elder in the 1st century supported these claims, describing an elaborate underground maze associated with the Sphinx and the pyramids. In the 4th century, Syrian philosopher Iamblichus wrote about a tunnel system beneath Giza, accessed through the Sphinx itself. According to his accounts, this entrance was once guarded by a bronze gate and led to the Great Pyramid. In 1935, a significant discovery was made by Hamilton M. Wright and his team. During a massive clearing project in Giza, they uncovered what appeared to be a vast, ancient subway system beneath the Sphinx and the surrounding area. This system included a series of shafts plunging over 125 feet deep, with expansive courts and side chambers. These findings suggested the existence of an underground city beneath the Giza Plateau, a hypothesis that sparked global interest. However, as quickly as they came to light, these stories receded from public attention, leading to speculations about the nature and implications of these discoveries. Why was such a groundbreaking discovery seemingly dismissed? The idea of a hidden underground network beneath the Sphinx was reignited in the early 1990s when a team led by Egyptologist John Anthony West and geologist Robert Schoch conducted seismic surveys around the Sphinx. Their studies revealed unexplained tunnels and chambers beneath the structure, suggesting that the ancient descriptions could have been more than mere legends.
We were not looking for structures under the Sphinx. I was actually looking for subsurface mineralogical changes. But we found some structures. Most importantly, we found a chamber under the left paw.
These findings were both groundbreaking and controversial, proposing a complex subterranean world waiting to be explored. However, this wasn't the only staggering discovery made by John Anthony West and Robert Schoch. They examined the erosion patterns on the Sphinx and its surrounding enclosure walls, suggesting they were caused by the flow of water caused by heavy rains. But how was this possible considering the Giza Plateau is located in a desert? The climate of the Giza Plateau has been predominantly arid for the last 5,000 years, meaning that such water erosion would have had to occur during a time when the climate was much wetter in the region. This pushes the possible construction of the Sphinx back to a period before the Sahara became a desert, potentially as early as 7,000 to 9,000 BC or even earlier.
Either this was a weird geological anomaly, or the Sphinx might go back to an earlier period. What we had ending the last ice age was huge climatic changes, which put a lot of moisture into the air, which came down as precipitation with huge thunderstorms, etc. And I think a lot of the erosion that we still see on the walls of the Sphinx enclosure go back to that period.
The proof that the Sphinx precedes dynastic Egypt by many thousands of years means there was, at some distant past, sophisticated civilization.
We cannot sensibly accept the insistence of Egyptologists that the Sphinx is just 4,500 years old.
The implications of this theory are profound, as it suggests that the Sphinx is several millennia older than the commonly accepted date. The traditional historical belief is that the Sphinx was built by the ancient Egyptians of the Old Kingdom during the reign of the Pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BC. For this reason, the theories of Schoch and West were met with skepticism and opposition, primarily from Dr. Zahi Hawass, the former Minister of State for Antiquities Affairs in Egypt. Hawass limited access to the Sphinx for further research and study, making it challenging for Schoch and West to advance their theories or conduct more comprehensive investigations. Supporting Schoch's assertions, archaeologist Sharif El-Morsi, with over 2 decades of experience working on the Giza Plateau, proposes that the area was once submerged under a massive flood. El-Morsi points to the temple site of Menkaure, which he believes was a former lagoon when sea levels were significantly higher, covering the necropolis, the Sphinx, and the surrounding temples and monuments. The evidence, as El Morsi outlined, includes indications of tidal waves and an intertidal zone, suggesting that the Giza Plateau experienced significant flooding, peaking at about 75 meters above the current sea level. Moreover, the discovery of a fossilized echinoid within the limestone used to construct these monuments has fueled the debate. Some researchers argue that the echinoid is evidence of the limestone's ancient origins, dating back 30 million years. However, El Morsi counters this by suggesting that the echinoid was petrified in a more recent epoch, highlighting its near-perfect condition and gravitational positioning on the floor within the intertidal range of the hypothesized lagoon. Adding to the controversy, two Ukrainian scientists, Manichev and Parkhomenko, presented a study at the International Conference of Geoarchaeology and Archaeomineralogy in Sofia, positing that the Great Sphinx might be hundreds of thousands of years old. They cite clear indications of water erosion and base their hypothesis on geological studies of the Giza Plateau, asserting that the Sphinx had to have been submerged underwater for an extended period. The idea that the pyramids and the Sphinx could be remnants of a pre-flood civilization is not only confined to academic circles. The concept of a great flood, akin to the biblical story of Noah, is a recurring theme in numerous ancient texts and cultures worldwide. Renowned underwater archaeologist Robert Ballard's exploration in the Black Sea lends credence to the hypothesis of a catastrophic flood occurring around 5000 BC, aligning with some interpretations of Noah's flood. This global deluge narrative is shared across diverse cultures, from India to ancient Greece and North American Indian tribes, suggesting a collective memory of a significant and worldwide cataclysmic event. The implications of these theories are profound, suggesting that the history of human civilization might be far older and more complex than currently understood. If the Sphinx and the pyramids were indeed constructed by a civilization that predates traditional Egyptian history, it would not only revolutionize our understanding of human history, but also provide evidence of advanced technologies and societal structures existing in a time before what is commonly accepted. Long before recorded history, there were advanced ancient civilizations capable of building gigantic megalithic structures we can't build today, lifting enormous stone blocks weighing thousands of tons and stacking them with laser-like precision. Blocks we still struggle to lift even with our modern cranes. They crafted mathematically precise, flawless monuments from the hardest stone on Earth, leaving us to wonder who these builders were and how they accomplished the impossible. Were they merely primitive societies, or were they masters of a forgotten technology lost to the sands of time? Uncover the evidence of an ancient, global, and technologically sophisticated civilization that once ruled over our planet, constructing gigantic sites the ruins of which are still standing, before a cataclysmic event erased it from memory. Access our eBook, Prehistoric Megastructures, a nearly 500-page volume packed with images and in-depth analysis of some of the most astonishing and unexplained ancient structures ever discovered, monuments that were clearly built with advanced technology from a time long forgotten. There's a limited discount on the eBook, so make sure to get yours before it's too late.